Prime Minister Narendra Modi has come under growing diplomatic pressure to commit India to reducing its net annual emissions, carbon or all greenhouse gases, to zero by a given date. Some of the world's biggest polluters, including China, have already announced such commitments. India and the US are the only two major economies that are yet to announce commitments. Both are expected to do so this year. There is some speculation that the Modi government could adopt 2047 as the deadline because it marks the centenary of India's independence from British rule. Such a deadline will require India to completely redesign its economy, which means everyday life and business will change completely. Can you imagine what a policy nightmare that's going to be? India and other developing economies have contributed far less greenhouse gases to the atmosphere than economies that industrialized earlier. Many people argue that it's only fair that India takes more time than industrialized economies to overhaul its coal dependent economy. But there is another way to approach this. India is a red hot investment opportunity for clean energy transition. Then why should it adopt a go slow approach when trillions of dollars of investments and jobs are waiting to be had? My guest on the Everyday Economics podcast today is Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance in Parliament, Jayant Sinha. Mr. Sinha was a Minister of Finance for State in the Modi government's first term. He has submitted a private member's bill in Parliament for making 2050 the legally binding deadline for India to neutralize its greenhouse emissions. I asked Mr. Sinha why India should commit to the deadline and do its best to navigate the policy nightmare it represents. Thank you for coming to the podcast, Mr. Sinha.
Very glad to be on the podcast, Pooja. Thank you for having me.
Let me start by asking you about the net zero target that you have proposed. You have introduced a private member's bill in Parliament. What is it that you seek to stress with this target?
It's extraordinarily important for the world to get to net zero, and it's very important for India also to get net zero so that we have a future that is sustainable and leaves us protected against many kinds of climate emergencies that may happen if we don't bring down carbon emissions. Today, total carbon emissions globally are about 51 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. Almost everybody agrees that we need to restrict global warming to no more than 2 degrees centigrade. Actually, it would be better to bring it down to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Since pre-industrial times, we have already warmed 1 degree, and that in itself is having all kinds of unprecedented and quite alarming consequences. If average temperatures in the planet go to 1.5 degrees centigrade or 2 degrees centigrade, which is the outer limit of what I think we can handle, we are already going to see very significant climate changes. Unfortunately, the trajectory we are on, Pooja, right now, we are going to get to 3 degrees warming. 3 degrees warming by 2100 is almost unimaginable in terms of what it means as we think about droughts, we think about sea levels rising, we think about cyclones, extreme weather events, all of these different things. So 3 degrees is almost unimaginable. We have to bring it down to 2, if not 1.5. Now, to get down to 1.5, the 51 billion tons has to pretty much get down to single digits, if not zero. Single digits, if not zero. So we are at 51 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent right now. By 2050, most climate scientists believe this has to come down to as close to zero as possible. This is the challenge that the entire global community faces right now. More than 100 countries, Pooja, have already said that by 2050 they will bring their carbon emissions down to zero. And really, the only two major countries that are left are the US, which everybody believes is about to announce a net zero target under President Biden's administration, and India. So when we come to India, we find that even though we are overachieving our Paris commitments, we have done a super job with respect to our international commitments so far. If our economy continues to grow at the rate it's growing right now, which is 5, 6, 7% a year, our carbon emissions are going to go from about 3.5 billion tons, which is where they are right now, to perhaps somewhere over 10, 12 billion tons if we continue to grow at the rate that we're growing. So we can't have a world where everybody is going to net zero, where we do need to get to net zero to be able to protect the climate, and have India go to 10 or 12 billion tons. Something has to change. And what we really need to do is we need to get India down to net zero as well. Now, how that should happen, when that should happen, I think that requires a very good set of discussions, a very robust debate among ourselves here in India and across the world as well.
Right. If your proposal of 2050 deadline to do this, or also another date of 2047 is being discussed because that marks the century of India's independence from the British rule, if that is accepted, let's say, then what difference will this make in everyday life? How would everyday life and business as we know it today change?
Before I answer that question, Pooja, let me first explain that India is absolutely the victim. We have not caused all this carbon dioxide to go into the atmosphere. It's the developed countries of the world that have pumped carbon into the atmosphere. We are the victims. We are facing the consequences of that kind of rampant carbonization that the developed world has engaged in. So it's very unfortunate that we are the victims and that we cannot pursue a similar development trajectory as the developed countries have. All that being said, the reality is that if we want to leave a better planet for our children and our grandchildren, we also have no choice but to head towards net zero, because that's the only way we can protect and keep the world safe. We have no choice, we have to do it. Now, to do that, it will require, now coming to your question, Pooja, many significant changes to our economy. That's the only way we can do it. And this will mean that we move our electricity generation away from coal to renewables, much of which is already happening. We've got to move our transportation from fossil fuels, that's petrol and diesel, also to electricity. We have to use hydrogen much more as a major source of energy. We have to make our buildings much more efficient. We have to make many of our industries like cement and steel much more efficient. So there has to be a complete green transformation of the economy so that we move towards the most advanced and most carbon free technologies possible. And I call this whole transformation getting to the green frontier. Essentially, India has to get to the green frontier, which enables us to increase output, increase our growth, and increase jobs, while at the same time reducing the use of carbon and actually making our air, our water, our land much, much cleaner, much, much greener. So, this is the green frontier, Pooja, we have to get to, where we increase economic growth, we increase job creation, but at the same time make our planet better as well. So that's the green frontier. We have to push, because I know this is an economics podcast. I'll use an economics term, which is we've got to push the production possibility curve to the green frontier, and we have to make sure that the trade-off between the planet and production, one being on the y-axis, which is the planet, and the x-axis being production. On that, we have the production possibility curve. We push that out so that we can get to the green frontier. That's what's required, but it means fundamental transformation in our economy and in the way that we live.
You've made many points. Yes, we need to achieve greatest development for the fewest additional emissions. And yes, India ranked only sixth after historical polluters such as US, China, Russia, Germany, Japan, UK. I think the US, the Paris Accord does acknowledge this reality, and it says that countries have common but differentiated responsibilities, which, as you said, is something that has been used to argue that rich countries should cut their emissions faster than countries such as India should. But at the same time, many people, and I think such as yourself, make the argument that one option is to increase your emissions as you develop, like China did, and then drastically reduce them quickly. Or the other option is to just reimagine your economy at this stage itself, even if it means that you do not get the benefit of contributing to greenhouse gases like the other industrialized countries did get. So you can sort of reimagine your economy at an earlier stage of development, and that is something which is fascinating, because what that sort of an approach means is that you're viewing this challenge also like an opportunity, an investment opportunity. I find that this whole debate on this subject tends to go into two different directions. One direction is that the whole policy framework, the whole institutional capacity required in order to translate the target into more short-term and immediate mini goals before the final destination is arrived at. And the other approach is what the fund managers and the CEOs and the investors are looking at, which is this investment opportunity, a chance to bet on companies that plan to redesign the economy. You seem to also agree with this approach. Am I right?
That is correct, Pooja. So, as you're correctly pointing out, there are two perspectives on this, or there are 2 points of view. The first point of view, which has been a traditional point of view, is that we are the victims. This is not because of our actions; it's because of the actions of the developed world. So, therefore, why should we take on a target? Let's do the best we can, and let's not compromise our development in any way, right? So, let's continue to pursue kind of the high carbon pathway that we have been pursuing. So that's one point of view. I'm taking a different point of view. My point of view is that we have to move to a green economy. Sooner or later, that has to happen because simply the world cannot afford, high carbon emissions. We have to go to zero carbon emissions. Sooner or later, that will have to be done. Let's seize that opportunity to remake our economy very, very quickly. And the good news is that most of these low carbon, zero carbon technologies also make our economy super competitive, super competitive. Like if we use electric vehicles are far more competitive than petrol and diesel vehicles for many reasons, which I can get into. So let's use this opportunity to remake our economy, to transform our economy, get it to the green frontier. And in doing so, we will drive growth, we will drive jobs, and we will make our economy extremely competitive. So let's use this as an opportunity to pour investments into green, advanced, efficient technologies, create lots and lots of good jobs. And because we are going down the decarbonization pathway fast, we will be able to attract a lot of investments around the world because people want us to do that. They are rooting for us. They are encouraging us to do that. So let's flip this around. Let's make this into a mega opportunity for us to transform our economy. And it's just intuition. It's very simple economic intuition, Pooja. Again, I know this is an economics podcast. And the economic intuition, the economic logic is that when we pour investments into the economy is bound to grow, jobs are bound to get created. So really the question for us is how can we quickly accelerate investments by undergoing a green transformation? In doing so, we will push out the production possibility curve and get to the green frontier.
What you're saying actually chimes with something that John Kerry said when he said that the new green economy, the net zero emissions economy, is actually the world's largest market. It's a multi-trillion-dollar market, and every fund manager is looking at it. And Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has also made some statements about this. When you say of the funding requirements, of the investment opportunities, what are the sources? What are the options? What is it that we are talking about?
Pooja, what we're talking about is we are saying we should be investing more than $100 billion a year into green technologies, into the green transformation over the next 10, 15, 20 years. That's a massive surge of investments coming into our economy. Much of it, I believe, will come from foreign capital because everybody wants India to get to net zero ASAP, right? So we are going to attract huge amounts of investments. Those investments are going to go into a slew of green industries, like, for example, solar, wind. They're going to go into food processing. They're going to go into waste management. They're going to go into water treatment. They're going to go into electric mobility of many kinds. Maybe there's a lot that will go into commercial construction that is very energy efficient. They'll go into air conditioners, into refrigerators that are more energy efficient. So there's just a whole range of industries that are both going to be transformed and new industries like electric vehicles that are going to get created. So it's just an incredibly exciting investment opportunity. As Senator Kerry has said, it's the most exciting investment opportunity in the world right now. And the biggest bang for the buck is in India because we have a chance to change our trajectory. And here I'd also like to emphasize, Pooja, that there is a very big risk of carbon lock-in, which is if we are buying the cars and the two-wheelers, we're building the power plants, we are constructing buildings, all of which are going to last a long time, and they are high carbon sort of using equipment, then we're going to get locked into that high carbon trajectory for a while. So we can't wait for this, right? If we want to peak and we want to get to net zero by 2050, today we've got to start to switch the equipment, the building stock over, all of this over, so that we are on a trajectory where we can bring down carbon emissions. It's good for India because it drives growth and it drives jobs, and it's great for the world because it reduces carbon, which, as I said right at the outset, is creating a planetary emergency like we've never seen before.
I'll come to the point that you made about locking, into a certain kind of fuel economy. But before that, I wanted to also, say that, for this to be an investment opportunity, there is obviously going to be, a policy framework required. And this is where the other alternative approach, it's valid. They make a valid point when they say that, so many things need to be done sectorally, different sectors, their targets need to be aligned, their policies need to be aligned. There's going to be the politics of winners and losers, which will have to be managed. There's going to be a question of, overall, when the economy moves in this direction, will that dampen development prospects? Different sectors and industries will need policy support and also coordination in many ways. And as I was just saying that, institutions are not India's strength. Policies is not always India's strength, even at at an easier stage. This is something completely challenging. So your critics have written, I'm not naming the critics, but I'm going to quote what they said. Your critics have written that your bill copies a little too readily from international experience without making the effort to design institutions that will work effectively in India. And India deserves more than just cut and paste. They're not disagreeing with your ultimate goal, but I think the emphasis here is on the nuts and bolts of policy making. What do you say to these critics?
Well, it's wonderful to have the debate, Pooja, and I think we should absolutely discuss what's the right institutional architecture. But first, let me tell you the three reasons why we should do net zero as opposed to following a go slow approach. So the three reasons why we need to go to net zero are: number one, we absolutely need to coordinate policy making across a lot of ministries, a lot of government departments, and between the center and the states. So having one clear target makes coordination very, very easy to do. And I think that's why it's important to have the target and a date of 2050 as well, or 2047, number one. Number two, I think it creates incredible stability and predictability around the investment climate. So if all investors know that we are heading towards net zero by 2050, then they know they can invest behind it because there will be no policy changes, no policy reversals on this, that we will follow through on this set of policies, and it will reduce the risk of investing dramatically. The hurdle rates will go down. Instead of people wanting to invest at a 20-25% equity IRR, they'll invest in a 15% equity IRR because policy making will become a lot more predictable and a lot more stable. So it will attract a lot more investments. So that's point number two. Point number three, I think geopolitically it's very important for us to show that we are not a laggard, but that we are a leader as far as policy making is concerned in terms of saving the planet. And by doing it that way, by showing that we are proactive, as we did in Paris as well, we will be able to earn the goodwill of many, many countries, and they will step in and help us in every way possible. So my three reasons are: number one, target concentrates the mind wonderfully. Number two, it'll attract investments and we will be able to invest in a lot of projects at lower hurdle rates. And number three, geopolitically, it'll be extremely valuable for us because our friends will support us and provide us all assistance that will be required. So I think for those three reasons, it's very important for us to pursue net zero. Now, with respect to the institutional architecture for doing this, we can discuss that. But let me be crystal clear about it, Pooja, which is our government has demonstrated that every time we've taken on difficult targets, challenging targets, we've achieved those. Obviously, it's been difficult sometimes. We've had to work hard to overcome challenges, but we've made it happen. whether it is GST, whether it's the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, obviously Article 370, or alternatively demonetization. There are major policy initiatives that we've undertaken, and we have accomplished those. So I have full confidence in state capacity and in our country's leadership to actually make this happen. But we do, as I said, have to create a target that everybody can rally behind, and our friends can see that this is a credible sovereign commitment that we are making.
Mr. Sinha, a lot of analysts actually say that the government's record on all of these policies and reforms, the intention was good, but the implementation was not that good. And, 2050 or 2047 is going to be an even more ambitious target, and there will be pulls and pressures. To overhaul a coal-dependent economy, a fossil fuel-dependent economy is not easy. The key will be resolution of conflicts, and expansion of coal power plants, for instance, could put the target out of reach. And India has just auctioned new coal mining blocks to private companies with no restrictions on end use in your constituency, and you have defended this. So you have defended this as a part of the whole self-reliant India, Atmanirbhar Bharat approach to economic development. How do you reconcile these two positions? And it's important also because this tells us, how challenging this target is. When I say it's challenging, I do not intend to say that it should not be a target. It most certainly should be a target. The question here is that, how do we get our systems to deliver? Our systems do not deliver as well as we need them to. And when I say this, including for your government on all the policy reforms that you have named, be it GST. We know it's not functioning well. The finance minister herself has said that it needs to be reworked, IBC, etc., etc.
That is the nature of policy making, Pooja, which is that it's a dynamic, iterative process. These are extraordinary reforms that have been undertaken, whether it's the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code or GST. These are extraordinary transformations that have been undertaken. No country in the world has attempted a transformation of the indirect tax structure the way we have done through GST. There is no country in the world that has attempted anything like that. We've made it happen. It's working. The adjustments are being made, and it's getting progressively better. And of course, collections also are going up. So, in that sense, it's improving steadily day by day. So we should not let the complexity or the challenges associated with these massive undertakings to deter us from what is right. What is right is that India should, of course, go down a net zero pathway and reduce carbon emissions. That's the right answer for India and for the world. So we should not be deterred from the complexity and the challenges associated with it. We must get it done. So I'm very clear about that in my mind. And obviously, we have to work on the policies, we have to work on the systems, we have to work on the institutional architecture to get it right. And I have complete confidence in our government and our leadership that that will be done. Now, you also asked another question, Pooja, which is how do you reconcile the fact that you are representing a coal generating district with the fact that we have to reduce carbon emissions? The answer to that, Pooja, is very simple. We of course are going to be using coal for the next 30 years, and we've got to keep using coal even as we transition some other aspects of our economy away from high carbon usage. So we are going to use coal for quite a long period of time yet, number one. Number two, while we are using that coal, we have to make sure that we use coal in the most efficient, sophisticated and advanced way possible. And that's why it's important to bid out coal mines, make sure that we are extracting coal in the most efficient way and extracting the highest quality coal, and shut down the old mines. So that's what these new auctions and all are going to do. It's going to enable us to shut down, like we've done the scrappage policy with vehicles, to move towards the more efficient, more advanced technologies and the more advanced sources. And the third aspect of coal usage is that we need to have carbon sequestration and carbon capture technologies as well. Obviously, they will require investment, but there are well-proven technologies for carbon capture that will enable us to still continue to use coal while at the same time ensuring that there's no carbon emission associated with it.
Right. Before I end, what is the update on your private members bill?
So it has been introduced into the Lok Sabha, and what happens with the private member bills is that there is a sort of waiting list of bills They are discussed when we have time for private members' businesses. So let's see. Obviously, there's a long waiting list for various private member bills to be discussed. Hopefully, at some point of time, it'll get through the waiting list and be there for discussion. And then hopefully we'll have a discussion in the Lok Sabha about the bill. But the goal behind introducing the bill, Pooja, was very much to begin this discussion, to begin the debate around what is the best way for India to proceed. And I'm very glad, in fact, that this debate and this discussion is now happening and people are engaging on these, extraordinarily important issues. Frankly, there are virtually no issues more important than the ones that we're discussing right now, because Delhi temperatures could go from a max of 45, 46 to 55. We could have drought in many important parts of the country, including in Jharkhand. We could have very, very powerful cyclones. We could have further glacial melting like we just saw in Uttarakhand. We could have massive floods in Kerala like we've seen. So all of these consequences are already upon us, and they will become even more acute and even more disastrous as time goes on. So these are vitally important issues, and I'm very glad we've been able to begin a debate on them.
Thank you so much for this discussion.
Thank you very much, Pooja, and I'm very glad I got a chance to discuss these very important matters with you. Please spread the word. Please do call in other guests as well who can discuss this. As I said, it's almost the most important set of issues that we're dealing with right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for making time for the podcast.